memorization is not education. And I know you talk about this a lot. It's something that actually it's one of the things that most appealed to me initially about when I discovered your research was I said, okay, this she's onto something here. So I like where she's going with it. I like where these thoughts are flowing, and I'm really, really curious as to evidently this is a barrier. This is a barrier to actually, using the sparks of the enlightenment, using that ability to rationale something, using our logic. It falls back on, well, I know I've memorized the equation. I memorized the answer. How did you get to the answer? And why is that the answer? And is there an alternative answer that might be even better? I'm curious as to what do you think can be done? What do you think can be done from an integrative standpoint, perhaps even, with allowing students and faculty to teach that, but also students to have the ability to, keeping what you're saying, that freedom to express themselves, viewpoint diversity, of course, but also the ability to engage in the text, to engage in the material, and actually learn, question, and kind of my personal hashtag is stay curious.
Yeah, that's a big challenge. And it's not an easy thing to do as a faculty member. So, something I'm really passionate about teaching in the classroom. I spend, I'm only in the classroom for one class this semester, but I work really, really hard on crafting the right learning environments. And I think we're kind of missing that because right now, and how at least I see many faculty approach the classroom, it's like, I'm the expert, you're the student, let me present to you my monologue of thoughts and ideas and expertise that I've acquired over God knows how many years. And the idea, this was actually one of the core pieces of teaching advice I got in my one teaching course, which was, I am a fire hose of information, and let me, my job is to spit out all this information and your job is to absorb it. And I honestly couldn't think of a worse piece of teaching advice for faculty. Like you said, me just spitting out a bunch of information and expecting the students to memorize it and work that out somehow and figure out what they're supposed to do with it, is not effective teaching. Does it work to some degree? Of course it does. If you throw enough crap at the wall, some of it's going to stick. It works to that extent, but I think we don't focus on how we set up the right kind of environment to foster curiosity in students, to actually have them exercise these critical thinking skills, working through information. How do I read a text and develop an original question or original thought out of it? How do I communicate that knowledge that I've learned in an interesting way?
Precisely.
And there's no right answer to that. There's no one way to do that.
Unfortunately, unfortunately there isn't.
Yeah, and it's really hard. Something I work on doing that in my classroom. Every semester I learn a little bit of something new and I try to adjust for the next semester. But what I'm working on now, there is a time and a place for kind of more of these lecture-based courses. Especially, I tend to do this more in my really early level intro courses. And this has other educational assumptions to it of like, let me give you kind of a baseline of terminology and basic knowledge that you can use that will help you in kind of these upper level courses. So it really is a longer term curriculum view. It's the idea that you have to have kind of a baseline of knowledge to be able to reach these more higher level discussions. And that's how a lot of universities operate in terms of your intro survey courses, and then you move up into more discussion style courses. So working within that curriculum, when I have my upper level courses, they're discussion based, they're not lecture based. I don't have lectures. But you also have to remember that, and I think what a lot of faculty forget, and it is easy to forget, especially after years and years and years of being in the classroom, is you have to remember that you can't expect students to have a thought within 2 seconds of you asking.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah, you need to really put yourself in a position of what you were like as an undergraduate. But also most professors were students that were at the top of their class, which presents another problem because you have like this small selection of professors that were the best students in class now teaching and having those same expectations for the full class, which doesn't make sense. Students aren't going to have a thought within 2 seconds of you asking a question. There was some research that came out that professors think I'm getting the numbers wrong on this for sure, but the idea is that professors think they're spending like 15 seconds waiting for a response or something, but in reality it's like 3.5, 4 seconds that they're waiting, which is just not enough time. Professors really have to get comfortable with sitting in awkward silence, and it's not awkward because students are trying to think, and that's literally the point.
Precisely. I mean, we have a word for this, a word that we don't use often. It's ideation, the process of formulating an idea. We have a word for this. It does take time. It's not, if to quote Stephen Fry, if an original idea, that's not too hard. Libraries are full of those. It's not. It's not as though it's not as though these are easy tasks, and that's probably why they're so beautiful. To formulate an idea for yourself, your perspective. But there also lies something, I think, which is, and you've discussed this too. I think it's more. I think it's something more more rigid or more emphasized in a negative sense in the American system of education than I think it is emphasized here. It's emphasized everywhere. I think it's more heavily emphasized there is the inability or the desire not to be wrong.
Yes.
Any form of failure is a personal slap, a personal taking away of who I am. Where obstruction is an opportunity to learn.
Yeah, I think that's a really excellent point, and I think that's something that our education system, how it's set up, is it's like an all or nothing game. It's like I have to get an A, I have to get a 4.0, or I'm failing. It's right or wrong. There's high stakes grades. So I think just the structure of our education system has really put this idea into students' heads of I have to be right or I'm not doing good enough, because everything is so rigid. And there's a place for those kind of things. There's a place for that. But if we're focused on creating environments where we're trying to foster curiosity, which comes with a certain level of humility of, hey, I may not know what I'm talking about, but this is a thought that I have. Right. Which, if we're working with sophomore and junior undergrads, like you're not going to have the most like profound, interesting thought all the time, but that's okay. So at least a practice that I try to do basic, reinforcement in my class, even if a student says something that's like off base or just like not, connecting the material or thinking about something wrong, I try to have some sort of positive response to, condition, I guess, students of like, hey, I'm happy that you're talking and that you feel confident to say a thought. Great. Now let's work on that thought. So I try to kind of reinforce the very act of speaking in class, because that's really hard. Even as an undergrad, I didn't talk until year of class. I was like so nervous to talk.
I was the complete opposite. I was complete opposite. Which though I've stood by something, which I think it's probably a good thing. It's I have a background, a lot of family members of mine were teachers, so maybe this comes from that. I'm not sure, but is whenever I was in a seminar setting, and I was the most spoken out, the most talkative, the most inquisitive, I didn't like standing up proud, and I wanted to hear the people. I wanted to hear, I really wanted to hear viewpoint diversity. I wouldn't fall back on, I like what he says. Oh, he says it better. Bullshit. I want to hear what you have to say. I want to hear your perspective, even if you think they're wrong. My outlook, my way of thinking is, even if you have one authentic idea, one authentic tidbit of a perspective, that might alter my entire way of thinking about everything I thought I had right already. And that's what it comes down to. The exchange of ideas in a classroom fosters the creation of better ideas overall. It's not just the marketplace ideas. You can have a bad marketplace because they're all bad, but it's like, it's like I've never it's about the quality of the exchange of those ideas, and being able to be, a word that gets too much bad rap today is discriminative of the ideas you choose and how you imply them. And I think it comes really down to even the intent of my podcast is I'm not even so fond of ideas, but the methodologies, the application of those ideas. How are we looking at them? How are we applying them? What approaches are we taking to them? Because determining on how you do so, you can have just really shitty ideas or really great ideas, determining on how you approach them.
Yeah, I think you make some excellent points here, because ideas, I mean, I can have all the interesting ideas I want in my head, but ideas almost always get better when you share them with other people and something in response back. That's why, we operate in this way. One, we want to have conversation, to work through our ideas, get your thoughts on my ideas, maybe change my thoughts, get feedback, make the ideas better. That's why we brainstorm. That's why
Precisely.
we have conversation. The challenge in the classroom comes from, how do we take what is so natural between a couple of people to have a conversation, and how do you scale that up even in a classroom of 15 or 20 people? Because there's a few challenges here. One, most students don't know each other, so sometimes it can be difficult to have really in-depth conversations with people that you don't know. Two, students are scared, right?
Yes.
They're nervous. They're just nervous to have the wrong idea. Again, they don't know people. People are sensitive socially, so you don't want to like be a complete asshole to somebody, in response. Just learning how to engage in these environments. And then two, you just have a numbers problem. Most deep conversations don't happen with 15, 20, sometimes 30 people in a classroom.
True.
And these are challenges. So I really like running discussion classes with undergraduates, and most of these classes usually have around 20 to 25 people. For upper level classes, it's kind of a typical number. So I have a few strategies that I've used to help try to facilitate that conversation in the classroom. One, I kind of I'm very intentional and transparent about like what I'm trying to do in a classroom. So I make it clear to students that I'm like, this is, we're trying to discuss, there's a value add to having these discussions, to really set the groundwork that I'm like, okay, we know what our role is in the classroom here. And I think, again, kind of setting the context of that learning environment and really framing it that way. I'm just very transparent about like why I'm doing everything in my course with my students, which I think really helps. Two, to solve the name I don't know you problem, is it's college, but everyone's making name tags. If you walk into a classroom, it has a name tag on their desk. It feels very like this is elementary school, but like, let's be honest, elementary school was way more fun than college in a lot of ways. Like everyone has fun in elementary school, and then you move up the education system and everyone's like, oh, this is terrible. So I think it's fine if we have some childish things
Absolutely.
in the classroom with name tags.
I would think that would even break down the whole social awkward barrier. You laugh out of the fact that you think this is silly, this is ridiculous. I'm, at 19, 20 some odd years old. This is hilarious, but I want to do it because it's funny. And the humor breaks down whatever awkwardness you might have and thought you would engage with initially. So yeah, I think that's a really clever, I never thought of that. It's a really clever idea. So kudos to you for doing that. It's really clever.
Yeah, that's a good point too. Is it's kind of it's like the first activity that I do on the first day of class. So we're just like, oh, this is kind of silly, but I never really thought of the way that like the humor of it or the silliness of it actually kind of breaks some of the like serious college class tension. Also, what it helps with is I'm terrible with names. Like I'll know that I've talked to you before, but like I have such a terrible job remembering names. It's easy for that. They all remember my name because there's one person. Me to remember 27 students' names is a little more difficult. But it also helps because typically in classrooms of discussions, I set everything up in a circle, which again just facilitates better conversation than people having to like turn around and being in rows. It's much more natural. But the name tags allow students to like humanize these random strangers that they're spending time with. It allows people to say, oh, Matthew, that was an interesting point. Or Matthew, I disagree with you, which is my favorite thing when students finally feel like it's starting to happen in my classroom where, like 6-7 weeks in and students are like, I don't like that thought, or I think differently. And I'm like, excellent. This is the point that we're trying to get to. So I found the name tags to honestly be probably the most effective discussion tool, because then students don't feel awkward of like, oh my God, I forgot your name. So then you have like this awkwardness that I don't want to talk to that person because I forgot. We don't have to worry about that now. Everyone knows each other's names. They can just look at it. So I think, there's those issues with how do we create a learning environment where students want to talk, they feel comfortable talking, and they feel comfortable to express a variety of views, ask questions, go in interesting directions. And that really requires setting up the environment in the right way to facilitate that, because we have a lot of barriers in place with the size, the scale, the lack of personal connection that a lot of these students have. So I think there's some strategies there that at least I've cultivated from a lot of different books, different workshops that I've gone to and things, and they've turned out to be quite useful. So I tend to have pretty good discussion going on with undergrads, which are notoriously difficult to get taught.
Right. I think and you're precisely right on this one. You're precisely right. I think that is the point at which you are in a setting, a classroom setting or otherwise, in which you have the comfort level to disagree with someone face to face. That's when actually you're in a very trustful setting. I would say. I say that's when you're among friends, as opposed to I don't want to step on anybody's toes. I don't know you. I don't feel comfortable. So that's actually a really good way to alleviate that awkwardness and break down that to engage the social instinct that we naturally have, but to break down the barrier of awkwardness to get started. So that's really, I think this is a clever approach. Actually, I really like this. I'm also really curious. This might be a good segue too. What and I know I think you recently, correct me if I'm wrong, I think you recently contributed to an article a short while ago, or at least commented on. I'm not, sorry for my Twitter followers, I don't keep up on it as much as I should. You were talking about something, again, I think it's very important we don't talk enough about. I mean, it's so pervasive in education from the primary, post-secondary and up, is the idea that you're a visual learner. You are auditory. The only non-visual learner is someone who has a visual impairment. I'm bewildered, befuddled, and outrightly beguiled by this because it's so pervasive, and yet it promotes a barrier. It restricts you as an individual. It restricts you as an individual learner to think that I'm unique. I'm a flower child in some way. I have a unique way of learning, and no, you may have a particular advantage in one area where you excel, but you are not going to have a sole element or a sole method in which you learn specifically. Yeah.
I think the learning styles, it's such a pervasive idea. And every semester, at the beginning, first day of class, I have like how this class functions, we make the name tags, it's a fun class to just kind of set the vibe for the course. And every semester, without fail, at least one student is like, I'm a visual learner, and like this, I'm just like, oh God, you're gonna be really disappointed when I start telling you that none of this stuff's true. But I think